Will Kentucky basketball be able to secure North Florida transfer Chaz Lanier? Well, it's looking like Mark Pope and the Cats are actually the current favorite to land Lanier over the Tennessee Volunteers.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be discussing Chaz Lanier, giving an update on the man himself, the top priority for Mark Pope in Kentucky basketball in the portal right now. Going to give a status update on him. Going to discuss Reed Sheppard and his efforts at the NBA Combine. Some interesting comparisons coming out of the NBA Combine. Could he be the next Steph Curry? A very fun question on today's episode. And then to round out the show, we're going to talk about a topic we've not discussed in literally months. Kentucky football. There have been times announced for their 2024 schedule, and we're going to take a look at it and just kind of give our thoughts and opinions on the Cats heading into the fall. Thank you so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you are watching on YouTube, I would greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the show, and if you are listening on podcast, I would also appreciate it if you subscribe there as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Kentucky basketball in hot pursuit of North Florida transfer Chaz Lanier, one of the top scorers in the portal right now and statistically the most efficient shooter in college basketball a season ago. 19.7 points per game, 44% from beyond the arc while averaging 4.8 rebounds, 1.8 assists, and nearly a block per contest. The 6'4", 175-pound shooting guard has been the target of Kentucky as well as the Tennessee Volunteers and the BYU Cougars, but it's looking like Kentucky basketball may very well be the favorite to land Lanier after Tennessee got a very early head start in his recruitment. On3 recently released an article discussing the latest intel on Chaz Lanier, and this article comes from Jamie Shaw. You can check this out over at on3.com, and this is what he has to say about Lanier and the latest on his recruitment. Maryland, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Kentucky are the four schools I have heard tied into Lanier's recruitment. Early on, Tennessee carried the buzz. Lanier is a Nashville native, and a few sources suggested watching for Tennessee the second Lanier entered the portal. Lanier has been all in on the NBA draft process, so he's not done much with regard to his college recruitment. A source close to the recruitment says he has not taken visits yet to Tennessee or Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, sources close to the recruitment tell me that the Wildcats have gone all in on Lanier. Some have suggested he is their top option left on the board. Sources have indicated that the staff likes Lanier's ability to score and feels he is the missing piece to the roster they have built. It is worth noting that Lanier has not withdrawn yet from the NBA draft. Despite not getting an invite to the NBA draft combine, he will still participate in his agency's pro day that is set to take place tomorrow, Thursday, May 16th. Sources close to the recruitment tell me that they expect him to return to school, and the two programs I'm told to watch for are Tennessee and Kentucky. While I am told Tennessee carried the early momentum, Kentucky prioritizing Lanier has made up a lot of ground in his recruitment. While recency bias and one source close to the recruitment, I would give Kentucky the slight edge here. Others would say it is too close to call at this point. Continue to pay attention here to timelines. After his pro day, things could move relatively quickly. And that's what I want to focus on here today. If you recall Mark Pope's musings, I believe, with John Rothstein just a few days ago, he certified that Kentucky would try and round out their roster with a couple of transfer portal additions over the next couple of weeks. And that fits in this timeline here with Chaz Lanier. Like Jamie Shaw mentioned, Lanier will be participating in a pro day with Lanier's agency tomorrow, May 16th. And then following that, things could move again relatively quickly. I'm excited to see where the recruitment goes. Obviously, if you're getting intel like this from Jamie Shaw, putting this out there in the public saying that Kentucky is now leading the race, if he had to give an edge to a team right now over the Tennessee Volunteers, it's very exciting to see that the Wildcats have made some ground and now feel like the contender to land him. Obviously, anything can happen here when it comes to NIL offers and what could be happening behind the scenes that we don't really know about. Not anything illegal or anything like that. I'm not suggesting anything of that nature, but I'm just saying things that we don't understand or know as far as conversations with Lanier, his agency, these two universities. There's obviously a lot of things going on in the background, and I think the forefront of things on Lanier's mind, a lot of them have to do with the NBA draft still. So I expect him to return to school. That's kind of been the MO here, although I will reiterate what I've said for what is now 3 shows in a row. I don't think Lanier's performance in the G League Combine, I don't think that that is indicative of his actual abilities in college, if that's even the word to use there, indicative. It's not reflective of what his potential is at a place like Kentucky. And I will reiterate this. Also, I said this on yesterday's episode. The reason that I'm so excited about Lanier and have been since he entered the portal is because of the efficiency. I'm a big numbers guy. I really like to look at stats. You know this if you watch the show for quite some time. If you haven't watched the show, we love to dive into KenPom and different metrics websites to kind of talk about how these players are actually effective in different areas. And Lanier statistically was the most effective shooter in college basketball a season ago in terms of effective field goal percentage, shooting 51% from the floor, 44% from beyond the arc, just as far as his base stats go. Those are very, very good numbers for a kid that also averaged 19.7 points per game. So a high volume, high efficiency kid who can grab rebounds, dish out the ball, also collected nearly a steal per contest. He's very, very good, and he is the pure scorer that this Kentucky Wildcats roster needs. Now, there have been some discussion online about how Kentucky may utilize their players in the backcourt if they bring in a guy like Lanier, and I think that it's really simple. I think that it's very simple. I don't think this backcourt is crowded, nowhere near that right now. Look at the way things could be setting up. At the point guard position, Lamont Butler, Kerr Kriisa. At shooting guard, you have Colin Chandler, you have Travis Perry as a depth piece, and then you also have players that can slide up to the 2, like Kobe Brea, but you don't necessarily have to play them at the 2, and this is something that I've tried to emphasize here on the show. Otega Oweh, Kobe Brea, those guys have primarily played the 3 during their time in college. They are comfortable at that small forward position, especially given their height, and then in Oweh's case, physicality. So I think sliding Chaz Lanier at 6'4" in at that starting shooting guard spot actually makes a ton of sense if you're trying to play more positioned basketball. I guess that's the word I could say. It's not positionless here. You're not throwing players up and down the roster into spots that they don't normally fit into. You're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, if you understand what I'm saying here. Chaz Lanier is a 2. Lamont Butler and Kerr Kriisa are 1s. Chandler and Perry are going to come off the bench regardless. Brea will probably start at the 3, if not Otega. Those 2 players will play the 3. Then you have Andrew Carr. Then you have Amari Williams and Brandon Garrison in your front court. It's very, very nice the way that Mark Pope and company have been able to build out this roster and kind of get everybody at an individual position that they've played. They've been able to kind of build a 2 deep here. In the backcourt's case, a 3 deep a little bit, including Trent Noah, who will play at small forward. You're going really, really deep 1 through 3, I think. Lanier, I think, fits in perfectly. I'm excited to see where this recruitment goes. Let me know what you think about Chaz Lanier in the comments below. Do you think Kentucky gets him? Do you want him? Is there another player in the portal that you may want more than Chaz Lanier right now? You can leave that in the comments below. All right. I want to talk here a little bit about Reed Sheppard and his performance at the NBA Draft Combine. He was insane. And he actually set a Combine high statistic that I did not expect him to set. And I have a question for you guys on today's episode about Reed Sheppard and Curry, and it has to do with an NBA draft scout just kind of tossing out some interesting notes about Shepard and his performance. Before we dive into that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you are into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you are burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home huge wins. You can keep your ride or die alive over at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Again, I appreciate you guys checking out the show today. If you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel or the podcast feed, I would greatly appreciate it if you went ahead and did that. And if you want to join the Locked On Kentucky Discord, it is linked, it is pinned on my Twitter at @LanceDahl_. If you want to go check me out over there, throw a follow, throw a question in my comments and my DMs if you have anything you want to talk about the show over there. And then also a link to join the Discord. It's free. It's a fun place to kind of just chat about Kentucky athletics and what's going on. So, Reed Sheppard had a phenomenal day during his NBA Combine, Pro Day, whatever you want to call it. Going through the drills, going through the comparisons, I think that we can safely say Shepard is a lock to go into the top 10, if not the top 5, alongside fellow Kentucky Wildcat Rob Dillingham. There's going to come a day here in the future, by the way, where we're going to do an episode. We're going to have to talk about Antonio Reeves and just how well he's been playing, because I think that he's playing himself into, I should say, a first-round draft projection right now. He's getting very, very close to that. And I said this way back when. Reeves is a first-round draft pick, hands down. But we're here to talk about Reed Sheppard. Shepard was very impressive. He measured in at 6'1", 0.75 without shoes and 181.6 pounds. He has a wingspan of 6'3", 6'3.25, and a standing reach of 7'9.5. Only 8 players were measured to be shorter than him at the Combine. So he's on the relatively shorter side. He is 6'3" with his shoes on. I want to point that out. And this is something that Bleacher Report points out. However, Shepard showcased other skills that surely caught the attention of NBA scouts. For instance, his vertical leap. If you had to guess what Shepard's vertical leap is without knowing, just throw that number in your head right now. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to comment it. 42-inch vertical does Reed Sheppard have. That was the best at the NBA Combine. Did not expect that. If you had to have me guess just, which prospects had the highest vertical leap, I would not have said Reed Sheppard. Fun little tidbit here that I saw in a tweet. Jeff Shepard's kid had a higher vertical leap at the Combine than LeBron James' son did. Just going to let that marinate for a second. Shepard also had a very impressive performance during his shooting drills. If I'm not mistaken, he went 21 of 25 during a three-point shooting drill. I believe it was off-ball movement drill where he was having to catch the ball kind of on the move in catch-and-shoot situations. Really, really, really solid stuff during his three-point shooting drills. And it really did catch a lot of people's attention. Global Scouting _ on Twitter said, take it with a grain of salt, but I'm hearing and seeing a ton of great things from Reed Sheppard at the NBA Draft Combine. That's a big word there. And then ESPN's Jonathan Givney went as far as comparing Reed Sheppard to the greatest shooter in NBA history, just based off of his physical traits. At Draft Express on Twitter, that's Jonathan Givney's Twitter account, he said, quote, different games, but similar physical traits between 21-year-old Steph Curry and Reed Sheppard, according to the DX database. Reed Sheppard and Stephen Curry, both listed at 6'3". Both also have a 6'3" wingspan. Both were very, very close in weight. Sheppard 182 pounds, Curry 181. Curry was just a couple of years older than Sheppard at 21.3 years of age. Shepard about to turn 20. Shepard is listed as the number 2 overall prospect in the latest draft big board by Bleacher Report's Jonathan Wasserman. And his most recent mock draft, Wasserman predicted Shepard to go number 3 overall to the Houston Rockets. I think it's going to be surprising to me if Shepard falls past 5 or 6. If we're just doing NBA draft kind of like assessment here, I think both Dillingham and Shepard will go in that top 10 for sure. And I really do think that Shepard, the more you start to look at some of his physical traits, the more you start to see how he could make a name for himself in the NBA. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you Reed Sheppard is the next Steph Curry. It's very, very difficult to envision that actually happening. But similar frames, both excellent three-point shooters, both statistically in college kind of did some similar things. So I went to look up Curry's numbers in college, and I went to look up Shepard's. Obviously, the point discrepancy between Curry's senior year and Shepard's only year, it's going to be massive. In fact, Curry averaged over 20 every year of college that he played 3 years at Davidson. If you go and adjust Reed Sheppard's points per game by increasing the volume of shots that he would take, if it was the same amount as Curry, he'd average 31 points per game. So if you took Steph Curry's shots per game in his senior season at Davidson, and you gave that to Shepard with Shepard's shooting efficiency, 31 points. By the way, Shepard last year averaged 8 field goal attempts per game. Steph Curry, 20.2 during his final season at Davidson. So it would be 31 points to go along with 4.1 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. Steph Curry in his final season at Davidson, 28.6 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 2.5 steals per game. Statistically, these two players are pretty similar. Statistically, they are similar in terms of efficiency and in terms of just what they did outside of shooting the basketball. Rebounding, they grabbed rebounds. Assists, they both averaged a ton of assists. Steals, dead at 2.5. Their height, their weight, their position, they are very similar coming out of high school. Shepard projected to be a top 10 pick in the NBA draft. Top 3 according to BR. I'm not sitting here telling you that Reed Sheppard is the next Stephen Curry. But I'm also not telling you that he isn't the next Steph Curry. Because when you see comparisons like this, and it's so eerily similar, it's hard not to draw those types of connections. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think? Is Reed Sheppard potentially the next Steph Curry? You can leave that in the comments below. I think it's a fun one. All right, before we wrap up the show, I've got to talk about Kentucky football. We've got to get to it because we have some early season game times kicking off. By the way, in case you don't know, SEC on CBS is no longer starting this year. It is SEC on ABC moving forward. And Kentucky football is going to play one of the first SEC on ABC games starting this fall against the South Carolina Gamecocks. And I think it's a very, very important game for Stoops and the Wildcats. I want to dive into why here in just a second. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Game Time. The NBA playoffs have been absolutely phenomenal. Kentucky Wildcats across the board just tearing it up. Jamal Murray, Shea, Karl Anthony Towns, all these guys have been excellent for their teams that are thriving in the playoffs right now. And it would be super, super awesome if soon I could be able to go and attend one of their games, get to check them out. And Game Time would be the perfect place for you or I to get a ticket if we want to go see a playoff game, because Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA. It makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip off. It is the place to go if you want to find last-minute tickets or just tickets at any time. They have flash deals, zone deals. It's really easy to find and buy NBA tickets for every kind of event in your area. You can find views from all different seats in the venue. The pictures there are great. I've loved using them for not just NBA, but MLB, also college football events a season ago. Lowest price guarantee as well means you can get if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less, you can get a 110% difference purchased by Game Time. It's super, super awesome what Game Time is doing, and they help you take the guesswork out of buying your tickets. I would encourage you guys to download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, wrapping up the Wednesday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. I forgot what day it was for just a second. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. We've got one more thing to talk about here. And it's Kentucky football. It's been a hot minute since we've talked about the Cats, and quite frankly, I think it's been justified. We've had a lot to talk about with Kentucky basketball, but I really do want to focus here for a second on the upcoming schedule and some tip-off times, some kickoff times, I should say, that have been announced. SEC's no longer on CBS. The delightful jingle rarely served as an introduction to Kentucky football games, however. In week 2 of the new contract with ESPN, the Kentucky Wildcats will host the SEC on ABC whenever the South Carolina Gamecocks come to town. 2024 season, week 2, Kentucky versus South Carolina. Kickoff time has been announced September 7th at 3:30 over on ABC. It will be one of the first SEC on ABC broadcasts, and this is what KSR had to say, and I completely agree with what they had to say in this article. It made me really want to reflect on their schedule as a whole. The magnitude of this football game matches the broadcast TV time slot. It's not hyperbole to say that the outcome of Kentucky football season will be determined by what happens in week 2. Fun little statistic here from KSR. Kentucky is 2-7 in home SEC games over the last 2 years. That is just simply abysmal. The 2024 SEC slate is unforgiving on the road with 3 trips to preseason top 25 teams, Ole Miss, Texas, and Tennessee. Kentucky must take care of business at home in order to reach or exceed lofty expectations. One other common denominator from the last 2 underwhelming football seasons, losses to South Carolina. Kentucky has lost to Shane freaking Beamer in 2 straight seasons. That ugly streak must end on September 7th. And by the way, those are the words of Nick Rush on KSR, not myself. But I agree with him. You cannot lose to South Carolina with the expectations that you have had coming into each of the last 2 seasons. And quite frankly, I don't think you can do it this year with the plethora of receivers that Brock Vandegrift has surrounding him that he can throw to, the talent in the backfield that Kentucky has collected, and the defense with 2 really, really solid defensive linemen in Deion Walker and Octavius Ox. I think we're going to see a pretty good Kentucky football team. You cannot have the schedule, especially early, hold you back from momentum or from achieving your goals. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, Kentucky's win total, over-under win total, is set at 7. If I'm not mistaken, over on FanDuel. Look at this here with me real quick. Southern Miss to open the season. South Carolina in week 2. Georgia in Lexington in week 3. Ohio in week 4, and then on the road at Ole Miss in week 5 before you take a bye. Those first 5 games are going to be crucial that you come out at least 3-2. You cannot be 2-3 heading into the bye week. You cannot be 2-3 heading into the bye week. That week 3 game against Georgia, by the way, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time kickoff on ABC as well. So Kentucky, back-to-back SEC on ABC games. One at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, one at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Those 2 games are going to be huge for your momentum moving forward. I think Kentucky, outside of Alabama, may play Georgia the most competitively ever since Kirby Smart took over the program. And I'm not saying by final score, I'm not saying by star ranking, I'm not saying by total wins that these teams get at the end of the season. I'm talking about just how physically Kentucky is able to match up with the Bulldogs. It is something that Georgia has said. It's something that Kentucky fans have said. We all acknowledge it. We all know it. Kentucky makes things dirty against Georgia. even though they've yet to win a game. If you are able to get that South Carolina victory in week 2, which, by the way, South Carolina just announced their starting quarterback in Lenore Sellers, Brock Vandegrift, Lenore Sellers, 2 relatively new quarterbacks to the SEC. Obviously, Vandegrift, a former Georgia Bulldog himself. Both these quarterbacks are going to be able to get to show off what they're capable of. I love the fact that Kentucky's able to get this time slot so early in the season. They're able to kind of showcase who they are. And if they could go and beat Georgia in week 3, you're really starting to shape up for what could potentially be a run at a 12-team playoff. Because, by the way, guys, in case you didn't know, SEC expanded this year, Big Ten expanded this year, and you're going to get to see some of those teams that finish in that 9-3, 10-2 type of range that don't make the conference title game. You're going to see them on the verge of or getting into this college football playoff, this expanded playoff. If Kentucky goes 9-3, they will have enough victories against really solid opponents to put together a playoff, potentially a playoff bid or a playoff resume. Look at the teams that they have to play that are really tough. Georgia, Ole Miss on the road, Florida on the road, Auburn at home, Tennessee on the road, Texas on the road, Louisville at home. Let's just path out 9-3 here real quick. Let's say you beat Southern Miss, you beat South Carolina. We'll say you lose to Georgia. You beat Ohio. You go on the road, you beat Ole Miss. You beat Vanderbilt. You beat Florida. You beat Auburn. You beat Tennessee. You beat Murray State. You lose to Texas. Oh, and you beat Louisville. There you go. That's 10-2 instead of 9-3. That's 10-2. Well, that's a very realistic possibility where your 2 losses are to what? Georgia and Texas. You could go lose to Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas, and you'd still have wins over Louisville, Auburn, Ole Miss, 3 teams that are probably going to float around the top 25. I think that this is very doable. I think this is very doable for Kentucky, but it starts early. South Carolina, again, one more time. SEC on ABC, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Following week, Georgia coming to town, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm super excited for college football season. Let me know what you think in the comments below about the early season. Very difficult matchups for Stoops and co. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show over on Instagram. That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.